Welcome to PD Insider. I'm Craig Miller of PLI, and this program is part of a series about professional development and the law. Many of us are thinking about the advancement of artificial intelligence in law, what it means now and the future of legal practice. For PDs, the challenges are immediate, but roadmaps are few. Along with partners in talent, there's the job of recruitment, which means bridging the gap with law schools to find the proverbial practice-ready lawyer. And then what to do with these fledglings, who even as digital natives may or may not be AI and tech savvy as they begin their careers at the firm. Joining me today are two guests who have had significant experience in both academia and practice. Jen Leonard founded Creative Lawyers to support legal institutions that understand the urgency to modernize practice and education. Before launching her company, Jen was the first Chief Innovation Officer and Executive Director of the Future of the Profession Initiative at Penn Cary Law School. Whitney Stefko has had a varied career in law and business, including time as a trial attorney, as well as a few years away from law to co-found and operate an e-commerce company, a cryptocurrency hedge fund, and a consulting firm. Now at Ford Motors Office of General Counsel, she co-leads the policy and legal operations function. Whitney is also adjunct professor at Arizona State University School of Law, where she lectures on legal ops, data technology, and the evolution of it all in the legal industry. The focus of today's conversation is how PDs can navigate recruitment and skill building in the era of AI to prepare their lawyers to deliver more value than ever to clients, to the firm, and to the profession. Welcome, Jen. Welcome, Whitney. It's great to have you both here at PLI today, and thank you for joining us. One special thing about today's episode is that you've both had tremendous experience in both academia and in the practice world. So that puts you in a position to uniquely, tell PDs, discuss with PDs what they can do in terms of evaluating and understanding a law school's curriculum and how it might better meet the needs of today's practice world. So how can a PD tell if the curriculum is actually tech forward, or there's really just a few showcased tech electives? And, how do you separate the law school's marketing from the substance of what's actually taking place in instruction?
I think there's a number of ways, and I know Jen has lots of thoughts on this as well, but the first and foremost is what are the courses that the law school is offering, and what do the syllabuses in those courses actually look like? Do they include practical skills for the law students? Are they comprehensive? Is it sort of more just a tertiary view of what technology is versus actually integrated into the class itself?
The history of legal education is replete with a division between thinking theoretically and what practitioners need. And that division is helpful in developing critical thinking skills, but becomes more and more problematic as the skills that we need for practice accelerate. So what is the history of your law school's integration of technology? Have they been doing it before ChatGPT emerged? Or are they doing it all of a sudden? So looking back and talking to alumni at your school that you're considering and seeing whether they were integrating technology in 2013, and there are schools that have been doing it for a very long time, and those schools are well prepared to consider how to integrate it now versus talking to alumni who maybe never had a technology integration in their core curriculum is a good indicator as to whether that school is actually prepared for the moment.
Great. So it's really more about the practical application of the technical skills in the practice realm rather than just understanding the legal implications of these tools and technology.
I would also add, and more than just having access to licenses for emerging products in the tech space, which is where a lot of the headlines gravitate that suggest that law schools are all over being able to prepare their students. The professors that teach legal writing and research are already doing the hard work of trying to develop those core competencies. And it's great that they have access to new platforms, but trying to actually fit where that integrates into your research and writing and development of those skills into an already jam-packed curriculum is difficult to do. So I would say that's a step in the right direction, but that doesn't mean it's fully integrated into your curriculum, making sure that it's infused everywhere and thinking carefully about how it manifests across all of the different pedagogies across your school.
I would just add to that as well that while I agree that I think sort of legal research and writing is the cornerstone of where we should be thinking about at least the first introduction of integration of these skills, it's still not happening a lot in those classes. And I think it really is at that faculty level, especially for, law firms that are looking to hire out of law schools. How are we thinking about the faculty training? Are those folks adjunct professors? Are they actually practicing and have those skill sets, or are witnessing in real life, in real time, what skills are necessary? Or do we have professors that are teaching in a very traditional sort of theoretical approach and not really taking into account their own training? I think we start at kind of that teacher must know skills in order to teach. And unfortunately, I hear from a lot of my students that, a lot of the writing teachers still aren't allowing use of, Gen AI in their classes or technological tools. And it's such a disservice because that is what we need in the legal industry. And we're just not training right from inception, as Jen mentioned.
But in a very practical sense, when it comes to recruitment, you have working lawyers going to law schools for on-campus interviews. And they may be more focused on mastery of, Hadley versus Baxendale than prompt engineering, right? So what's the role that PDs can play in helping reshape the types of questions and the things that they do when they're at the schools and trying to assess talent and who would be a great fit for the firm?
You're absolutely right, Craig. I mean, these are busy practicing lawyers. Many times they're returning to their alma maters. They remember the questions they were asked when they went through OCI. They're given transcripts maybe at the interview. They're looking at grades from classes they remember. And so PDs have a really critical role in thinking through what are the competencies that we're actually looking for coming into our firm in a profession that's rapidly changing. And as we just discussed, we're already dealing with the challenge of trying to assess for the first time how these curricula are different across law schools. One thing we haven't really talked about is how uniform American legal education actually is and has been until the last few years. And that's challenge one, right? As your first question alluded to, digging under the hood and figuring out who's teaching these skills. And then equipping your lawyers who are going to these schools with the questions and the frameworks they need to go beyond the transcript and go beyond the questions they answered to actually figure out what the competencies are that you need. So you sort of need to step back before they step into the interview room and think, what are the skills that we actually need from our junior associates? There are a whole host of skills that I suspect law schools are very far away from introducing to their students that, frankly, law students are having to self-educate about. But I think savvy students, and I've worked with them, I'm sure Whitney has them in her classes, are teaching themselves. And by equipping your lawyers with these types of questions, you can start to suss out who is understanding how the landscape is evolving and how they need to develop those professional development skills that go beyond sort of the research and writing skills, the grades that they're getting in their core classes, so that they can come back to your firm and say, these students are actually the ones that get it beyond the grades and the school that they went to.
I think that our legal expertise at the academic level is just foundations now. I think all of these other skills are really where we're going to set candidates apart from ones we want to hire versus ones we don't. Certainly from the client side, I really want to see our law firm stressing, value and really taking that sort of summer associate class from OCI or first level associate and kind of bringing them into the fold with what the clients are really looking for. And while AI tech competence, again, I think is moving into this area of also foundational levels, I think that there's another layer of just communication and other, as we say in the corporate world, soft skills that I think are necessary that we are definitely not teaching in law school, arguably not teaching at the law firm level either. And I think that's prime opportunity for these PD professionals to come into law schools, really garner the students who are, good at those skills just naturally and be able to bring them into their firms and sell them as that.
Mm-hmm. That's great. And you made a couple of really important points there, but you mentioned clients. So let's talk about things a little bit from the client perspective. And we hear that clients increasingly push back on paying for work by junior lawyers, right? I mean, that's not new. And how do we get over that? Could summer associate programs then be sort of reimagined to become areas where the firms can really work on skill development? And if that's the case, what would a great summer associate program look like, this summer
Yeah,
and in the
Craig,
future?
it's one of our favorite questions, I think, especially from the client side. The reason that many clients have stopped paying for first and second year associates is because the value isn't there. I can have technology now do my doc review. I can have technology, do a lot of the tasks, the information gathering and processing that first and second year associates were historically doing. Now, it's a challenge because how do you get a third year associate if you don't have first and second year associates? And if we're expecting the firms to absorb the cost of that first and second year associate, how do we sort of reconcile then, payment for that and making sure that they're getting good training? And I do think that the summer associate program is prime opportunity to start thinking about it more like a boot camp. It absolutely starts with what candidates you're selecting. Are they the right candidates? Are they growth oriented? Are they going to come into this environment and adapt and learn and be willing to undertake more work than I think historically we have given summer associates? But I think it's real work product. I think it's giving summer associates the opportunity to have, first pass at a document instead of just reviewing citations of someone else's work product. I think it's less whining and dining and more substantive work. I want summer associates to come out of, at least my students, their, experiences in the summers saying, hey, that was better than any class I took. I got real world practical experience. I'm going to be able to take that into my first job. And I now have a differentiator on my resume to say, hey, I have this skill set, whether that be technological, whether that be, good client development, whether that be, expertise in sort of interacting with clients. And so I think there's a number of opportunities that we have in this very early stage to think about it more like a boot camp, more like a skill enhancement as opposed to, how can we sort of make these summer associates love our firm and want to work here?
Mm-hmm. Well, would you agree that, growth mindset is really the key? Because whatever the technology is today, okay, when they're after their first year ends in law school, by the time they're actually a practicing attorney 2-3 years later, the technology is going to be different. And so they're going to have to constantly evolve and constantly be prepared for change. How do you imbue the new lawyer with that?
Yeah, it's a tough skill to try to reconcile in our industry because we as lawyers want to be and are paid to be right. And so how do you sort of then, encourage folks to fail, to try new things, to, really adopt this growth versus fixed mindset? Culturally, I think that exists already kind of carte blanche at a firm anyways. And so whether it's growth or fixed mindset is really built in, I think, to a firm dynamic. And so I think maybe before we get to hiring, maybe evaluating what that firm culture looks like and do we need to do some work there first. But I think on the, summer associate program, first year associate, really sussing out whether someone has that growth mindset is just in asking questions about, their own personal experience. What's something that you thought was inefficient and looked to, become more efficient in? Is there a new skill that you've learned outside of law school? Is there a diversity of experience here outside of just your one track? I'm, in my 3 years of law school, going to get hired by an Am Law 100 firm and then, eventually become partner there. Like, what else do you do outside of this? How do you learn outside of this? And do you have an appetite for that? Is it something that you're a curious person, or, are you really sort of just set in kind of this one lane and not really migrating anywhere outside of that?
Oh, I could not agree more. And I do think we're directionally moving and have been for at least the last decade in the context of well-being, right? Helping lawyers become more resilient, helping them develop growth mindset. And that's been a helpful foundation to lay for the tech evolution that we're experiencing. And I know we're focused on technology because it's driving so much change, but the technology is just one driver of change. We have intergenerational dynamics, we have economic instability, we have the shifting leverage increasingly from the firms to the client and the elevated expectation of value and efficiency and all of those things, and the changing career preferences of our incoming lawyers and the likelihood that they will leave your firm and do something different. And all of those things, as Whitney said, lead to you wanting to find people with different mindsets from the past. It's sort of like what got us here is not going to get us to the next phase of success for our firm. And so equipping your lawyers at on-campus interviewing with better frameworks to identify growth mindset, resilience, and all those things that are the exact opposite of the personality traits of lawyers to date. Especially, as Whitney said, I cannot sort of underscore what she talks about more than the diversity of thought and experiences, which is exactly one of the things that has stymied us with respect to innovation and all of the moats we've put up around us to be so monodisciplinary. And all of that has led to enormous success for firms, but it's also now what is really hindering us from figuring out what comes next. And also, as Whitney said, metacognition. How do I continue to develop new skills in a world where I can't rely on my law school to respond quickly enough, or necessarily my PD program, because nobody can respond quickly enough. So how am I self-educating? How do I see around corners and develop those skills? And I think that's where your audience has the opportunity to equip people to develop summer associate programs and then programs all across the course of a lifetime of your lawyers to make sure that you're developing a workforce that is meeting the moment individually and collectively.
That's really interesting, because I just want to pick up on like the role of the law schools. I mean, so sure. I mean, the legal profession was, was an apprenticeship profession, and then we got, the case study method in law schools. So that's the history, and that's an old history. Are law schools capable of change, and what's going to take to, make them change?
I think generally as an industry, academia tends to lag behind. It's much like regulation. We sort of think to ourselves, wow, the training that we're providing is not providing the actual skills we need in the industry. Let's think about the money aspect first and then kind of retort back to how we're actually doing the training, which is unfortunately the opposite of really what it should be. But I think it's going to be the clients pushing further on costs and experience and value of the lawyers at the law firm. And then I think it will be the law firms who start pushing, back a little bit more on the law schools. There are a handful that are doing some really incredible things. They're providing very practical skills. I think they're working very cohesively with the law firms and what that looks and sounds like, and how they're training the students to go into practice for actual value delivery on, day 1 or maybe day 10 after they get all their systems up and running. But I do think that there is a big opportunity for us to have a bigger conversation around what education actually looks like and the value that we're getting out of our education. And I think it's an industry-wide academic shift, not just institution by institution. But I do think that the law firms play a big role in this as well. A big sort of push that academia has is from the law schools that are hiring these students. And if we continue to hire based on pedigree, based on, they were top of their class, they went to this really incredible school, we're going to wine and dine them over the summer and then bring them in. To me as a client, that is not where value exists. And so I think that there needs to be a greater conversation in the law firm world, again, about who are we hiring, and is that actually the value we want to provide to our clients, or is there some missing component here that we need to have a conversation with the academic institutions to train on, or that we need to fill that gap and train ourselves?
Oh, great. So do you think that the PD professional can have a role in that dialogue between the firms and the law schools?
I think PD professionals have a role to play, certainly, and cognizant that you can only control what you can control. We've given some frameworks and tools that they can use to drive change. I also think it matters who is having the conversations if you want to drive real structural change. So having lived inside of a law school and developed PD programs, you're frequently having conversations between the PD professionals in firms and the career strategy office in a law school. Everybody wants to achieve change, but you rarely have the power to actually affect the core curriculum or affect the hiring practices in the sense of what Whitney's talking about, which is the market is not rewarding necessarily the firms or the law schools that are truly innovating in the core of what they're doing. They are rewarding prestige and brand, right, at the end of the day. So if you really want to drive change, what you need is the chair or managing partner to be having conversations directly with the dean and the doctrinal faculty around what is happening and what real change looks like with your PD professionals in the room. And you need real buy-in. And that, I'm saying it as though that's an easy thing to make happen.
Right.
It's
Right.
an enormously challenging thing to make happen. But those are the stakeholders who would actually have to affect real change, I suspect.
Right. So, like in many things, leadership is important and needs to play a positive role in order to affect the change. But thinking again in terms of client value and being able to enhance that, and that's what the law firms themselves try to message continuously. I mean, how do you distinguish the law firms? They all say we deliver great client value, right? So what does enhanced client value look like in this, in the new world that we're in now? What does that really translate into in developing for your clients something better than you've had before and getting more bang for their buck?
I think that value can be provided from very junior attorneys. It doesn't need to be senior partners in firms. I think so often we see, again, generally speaking, not on behalf of Ford Motor Company here, but I think generally speaking, we do see a lot of, partners who own books of business and aren't necessarily doing any of the work anymore. I think that there's an immense opportunity there to start putting your summers in front of the clients as well. I care a lot about succession. I care a lot about what is going to happen to my business after the senior partner retires, or in 5 years when the senior partner maybe isn't as, up on the technology or innovation or ways to really enhance efficiency on our book of business. And so putting your summers in front of the client, letting them get that practice of what does it look like for good business development? What does it look like for interacting with the client? What is a good versus a bad communication with them? What is their feedback on my work product? And so I think that that's such an incredible business development opportunity to utilize your summer associates in that way. Not all of them are going to be digital, they're digital natives, but not all of them are going to be AI native in that way. And so I think you can do some L&D to sort of, supplement those skills, but use them to, put in front of your clients and show your clients that your succession planning is in place, that there's someone excellent to take over that work, whenever it is that your senior partners are moving on, and really give that skill set development around kind of what client communication development and good relationship building looks like.
Given some of your comments, it makes me think about the trend towards reverse mentoring. So can you talk a little bit more about that and, how junior lawyers may actually be able to have that kind of influence within the firm? And is it real and does it work? And when it is real and it is working, what does that kind of look like inside the firm?
Absolutely. I think reverse mentoring can happen in a number of different ways. My favorite sort of reverse mentorship is when we have a first or second year associate who's been seconded to a client from a law firm and takes that knowledge back to the law firm. Here's the processes that this client is doing. Here's what they want us to do. Here's how they think about value. Here are their objectives and KPIs. Here's what we need to meet in order to help them accomplish that, right? That is amazing business development for a law firm because now you've just secured your place with, that client and you have sort of a person in-house that you can now rely on for that intel. I think we make the mistake a lot of times thinking that just because someone is fresh out of law school that they have all of these amazing technological skill sets, and there's that disconnect because we don't have those, skills being taught necessarily in law schools. And so I think it is that, preliminary interview stage to understand who has what good skills, and then how can you buddy or partner those folks up with mentors in the firm for more of a two-way, I think, mentorship as opposed to just a straight reverse mentorship. So senior partner maybe is training summer associate or first year associate on, good business development or how a particular client works or how, work product needs to be delivered on a particular book of business. And maybe that particular associate is really excellent at storytelling and can kind of then help, senior partner work in that same skill set development. So I think it's more of a two-way mentorship in my view, as opposed to reverse mentoring and just getting out of this idea that just because someone is fresh out of law school or young, they're going to have all these, technological skill sets that a lot of the clients are demanding now.
And certainly you'd expect the established attorneys to know about their clients' needs and obviously to know the law and the courts and all the things that are necessary, the deal making that the new lawyer needs to learn.
Yeah, I think it is growing. I don't have the data, I think, industry-wide to kind of validate that, but I suspect that is the case. And certainly with headlines like, Amazon laying off 14,000 people this week, Target had a whole, slew of layoffs as well. And a lot of those are starting to hit the corporate teams. They're starting to hit legal.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's not enough bodies often to do a lot of the innovation and efficiency that I think is being demanded in these, especially bigger businesses, the Fortune, 100. And so I do think that there is an opportunity to leverage that secondment as a business development tactic. We'll give you this person for a much lower cost. They'll come in, they'll be integrated into your team, they'll learn your processes, but with them, they will also bring whatever those, new skill sets are that the client really values. And again, you have to have the talent that has those skill sets in order to actually go in and do that. But I think it's a missed opportunity for a lot of firms. And I do think that there is that alternative legal service provider market that is starting to grow as a result of that missed opportunity for firms. There has to be a big discussion there, too, about if you're offering a secondment to a client, what is the value that they're providing and what is the cost that's necessarily associated with that? If I'm just paying for, an hourly lawyer and that lawyer is just providing what your firm provides, there isn't some added value there or lower price, then what is the benefit, to the client as well? So, yeah, I think there's a number of ways to structure that. I think it is a growing market. I think we'll continue to see it be a growing market. And again, I think that as companies are starting to have these layoffs, the goals of insourcing in the name of efficiency become a lot more challenging for those in-house teams.
Is there anything that PDs can do to help meet the moment in terms of secondment and how it can both benefit the individual attorney as well as the information and the intel, like you said, that they can bring back to the firm?
Yeah, knowledge management is a huge gap, I think, for a lot of big companies. If there's been turnover or layoffs or people have come and gone, there's just a gap, I think, in what was done previously, that work product, being able to share that information within the firm or within the corporate legal department. And I think PDs have an immense opportunity there, especially with secondments, to really bridge that gap in knowledge. And so I do think there is, again, that baseline foundation legal expertise that we need, but what is that added skill that secondment brings? Jen talked about a whole list of skills that are sort of the latest and greatest, what's going to take us into the future. And so really pitching your seconded resource with these added skills, depending on what the client, needs, it's really a conversation about that value. What value is that secondee bringing? And how is that benefiting me over hiring someone internally or hiring another law firm to perform that task?
Okay, so interesting. So PDs can actually have a role in some of the dialogue that may be taking place with the law schools, and also helping prepare the lawyers within the firm for secondment and other things that are client-facing after they've arrived at the firm and gotten some experience under their belts. But beyond technology, obviously we're focusing on technology for a lot of good reasons, but there are other skills and other competencies that new lawyers and all lawyers need to be equipped with. And what do you see as emerging competencies for the lawyer today?
Yeah, well, as I'm listening to all of Whitney's fantastic insights and thinking about client value and efficiency, what I keep thinking about is design thinking. All of that is rooted in empathy. And I think that's a skill that I'm still amazed how few lawyers know about design thinking, leaders understand it, but really teaching that as a core competency, because that's at the root of everything you're trying to do, right? And then defining what the problem is that you're trying to solve for whichever stakeholder it is you're serving, and then prototyping and ideating and all of those things. So empathizing with whomever your client is as technologies emerge and as user preferences and experiences in the world change, how can we create better ways to communicate with our clients? What is actually useful to them? What is the business problem they are trying to solve? They don't want legal problems. They don't really want to talk to you. I hate to share that with the lawyers, but they're talking to you because they need your help navigating a problem. And then how do we test that? And how do we engage with them to get their feedback? Lawyers are, again, this goes to the resiliency point. we are notoriously afraid of feedback. And it's amazing for people who are such high achievers, but it's sort of not surprising given how much of a perfectionist tendency we have. I don't love feedback either, right? But it goes to the growth feedback or growth mindset idea. See, I messed up and now I'm embarrassed because I'm a perfectionist. But it's growth mindset. If we are taught that feedback is fuel, it's like an athlete's mindset. If feedback is fuel to get better versus feedback is an indelible mark on whether you're a good attorney or not. That changes the whole mindset about how you approach your work. But all of that goes into PD and assessing candidates from the very beginning and then developing throughout. And I think all of that is embodied in Whitney's great answers about what we should be doing to prepare the lawyers of the future.
In legal operations, we sort of historically have taken a people, process, technology approach. And I think we often forget about that first pillar, the people pillar. Again, in corporate, it's sort of dubbed as this soft skill, which has become almost offensive to some people when you mention soft skill development. But in an age where technology is evolving so quickly that we don't need the people doing as much of the menial work anymore, really what we want are those people skills. So to Jen's point about design thinking, relationship building, communication, how are we enhancing our professionals so that we actually have those good peopling skills? How are we thinking about empathy? How are we thinking about storytelling? The amount of terrible pitches I sit through is incredible. And these people are still garnering business from that. But how, right? There's really not very many firms who are great at pitching. And so again, how do we sort of teach people to evaluate who is my audience? How am I articulating what their value is and what problem I'm going to solve for them? And so there are little things that we can be teaching that we're just not investing in. And I know it sounds frilly and the people part of this and the soft skills and, the learning and development, but these are important cornerstones as we move more into a world where a lot of the stuff we've historically done is being automated with technology.
As we try to sort of broaden our aperture and bring in, different views from different approaches, from inside of the universities where some of you have spent time, there are other professional schools. There aren't just law schools. There's medical schools. There's business schools. How do you see them adapting to these moments and also overcoming some of the, historical things that tie them to the methods of the past?
Yeah, frankly, they're all struggling. So law schools have their own unique challenges, but there is a huge philosophical conversation happening across higher ed about what the purpose of higher education actually should be. And there's a huge tension across faculty about the purpose of education. I would say what I found interesting when I was in legal education talking to medical professors was they see it as a badge of honor and table stakes to be coming into a lecture hall wearing a white coat, meaning that they did rounds that morning and they know the experience of practicing medicine. And they were stunned when we shared with them that most tenured law faculty are not practicing law day to day. So there is that immersive experience. And again, it's the empathizing, right? What are you actually stepping into? And that is by design from 1880, right? That is how it's structured. So the idea that we are so distinct from the practice is a real hallmark of our model that is, when you speak with people in other disciplines, is stunning to them. And I think a real problem for responding to the moment that we're in.
Yeah, that's really illuminating that the medical professors maybe were coming in from rounds, whereas law professors may be coming in from the library, but they're not coming in from the courthouse or from negotiating a deal typically.
In the hard sciences, the students and the practitioners are thinking of technology not so much as a threat, but as a way to augment what they are learning about and doing and looking for better ways to secure outcomes for their patients. Versus the way that I think are skeptical, again, going to the lawyer personality, our first instinct is always to lead with skepticism versus an optimistic outlook of I mean, not to get on my soapbox, but we exist in a marketplace where we serve 8% of American civil legal needs. So there are 92% of the problems out there that we have an opportunity and an obligation, because of our privilege of self-regulation, to figure out how to respond to. So I think we should be adjusting our mindset to embracing new technologies while elevating ethics and responsible guardrails. But I look to our colleagues in medicine who are also data-based and rigorous in their application, and I look to them as models of thinking about how do we continue to elevate our professional obligations while solving problems in better ways by leveraging technology and being connected to practice and not viewing it as something that marginalizes our intellectual rigor.
Medicine is such an interesting comparison, too, because medicine has a residency. You complete school and you have practical experience where you're on the job training under someone. I would argue that associate tenure is not the same. It is not meant to be training. It is meant to be, how can we bill you out from day one? Are you earning revenue for the firm? What is your realization rate? How does that mean, profits are equated based on your performance? And so I think there's really, unfortunately, a bigger, more aggregate problem around the business of law and how that is structured relative to the business of medicine. Medicine certainly has its issues too, but I think there's just inherently in the way we educate in medicine, the expectation that you're going to have on-the-job experience and training. It's built right into the years that those poor medical students are paid next to nothing for their residencies. We don't do the same with law firm associates. We, hire them at multi-six figures right out of law school, and the expectation is they perform. I think it's such a false narrative that they have the experience or the expertise to be able to do that, and that's why we see the clients pushing back on that value. It's just not there. And so I do think that there's just a different level of metrics that medicine has and expectations. And I think that it makes them more ripe to adopt technology because, again, the expectation is around this training and development, this growth orientation, as opposed to on day one, our expectation is that you're billing and that you're providing value and that your realization rate is going to mean we keep you after year one.
If I could add one more example that might come from a somewhat unexpected place on campus, but one of the people who taught me design thinking teaches at the School of Architecture at Penn. And to the point of resilience and growth mindset, his students spend the first semester learning how to accept critique and give critique to one another. And they are so much more resilient than law students as a result, because part of being an architect is working with people and getting tons of feedback on your drawings. And I was just so inspired by that and thinking about how we can teach lawyers to be better about that, because it should be part of our work. We should be getting much more feedback from our clients, but we're afraid of it because it's not part of our training, really.
Yeah, that's interesting. Perhaps reviving and updating the apprenticeship model is the way lawyers should start to think about their training. But anyway, those are such great points. And I think we'll leave it there. So I just want to thank both of you, Jen and Whitney, for being at PLI today and sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
It was an absolute pleasure. I really enjoyed the conversation.
I'd like to thank my guests, Whitney Stefko of Ford Motor and ASU Law School, and Jen Leonard of Creative Lawyers, for sharing their insights. We look forward to you joining us for another edition of PD Insider. This is Craig Miller of PLI. Thank you, be well, and do great things.